So I guess Barca aren't broke anymore, much to Rashford's disapproval. Meanwhile, the Dutch World Cup squad just dropped. Crystal Palace win their 3rd trophy in a year, and Man United are closing in on their first summer signing. This is DMAC Daily. I'm sorry, Brocolona, I was unfamiliar with your game. You mean to tell me that in the year of 2026, Barca are dropping 80 million euros to steal a player from a Saudi-owned club? Ladies and gentlemen, the game is officially back. But on a more serious note, this is an absolutely stunning transfer for a multitude of reasons. For starters, the fee itself. Now, I know Barca's financial situation has improved substantially over the past year or so, much to the relief of Dani Olmo, and with the news that Lewandowski's departing this summer, who was the club's highest paid player, I anticipated summer signings would soon follow. You know, the rumors had been flying with big names like Bastoni, Alvarez, Joao Pedro, all linked in recent weeks. Separate note, back off my Brazilian striker, okay? If you want a proper Chelsea 9, the lap's right there, mate. Anyways, I assumed the immediate priorities for Barca were first securing the permanent transfers of loanees Joao Cancelo and Marcus Rashford. But then out of nowhere, on a random Thursday in May, boom, 80 million euros on a separate English left winger. Crazy work. Gonna be a bit awkward in the England camp just quietly. What this means for Rashford now, honestly, who knows? Barca still has a 30 mil option to buy readily available till June 15th, but considering his wages and the fact that Barca now have Rafinha, Gordon, plus Ferran and Olmo can also operate as left wingers too, it kind of makes no sense to bring in Rashford permanently as well, which is absolutely wild to think about considering he had a fantastic individual season on loan with his contributions regularly being praised by Hansi Flick. So why are Barca now prioritizing Gordon over Rashford? Well, The Athletic are reporting that the overall structure of this enormous transfer would actually be quite similar to Rashford's, as Gordon's salary would be lower, and due to the length of the contract, they could amortize the transfer fee over several years. Now, in terms of the profile, he's younger than Rashford. We know Hansi Flick loves athletic players, and Gordon certainly is that. He's absolutely rapid, his work rate is top, and he also has the versatility to operate as a makeshift 9 or even on the right. The lingering question mark, however, is that Gordon hasn't exactly proven to be a truly elite player yet. He had a phenomenal season with Newcastle 2 years ago, but his performances have since dropped off. Granted, his numbers in this year's Champions League were outstanding, but half of those goals scored were from the penalty spot, and remember, he bagged 4 of his 10 UCL goals against one team from Azerbaijan. Now, I'm not here to suggest he's a complete waste of money or that he's incapable of succeeding at a bigger club. You know, there's a reason why Bayern Munich, amongst other giants, were seriously keen on the Englishman. That being said though, 80 mil is objectively an enormous fee. Even in today's inflated market, where guys like Elliot Anderson are valued in excess of 100 million pounds, it still feels excessive that Barca are dropping this kind of money on a player who you'd assume arrives as a backup to Rafinha. Maybe Barca do in fact have the finances to bring in several big names, but I'm just surprised that a striker and a center back were not the principal transfer pursuits, because those two are the most glaringly obvious areas they need to improve on. Maybe Hansi Flick is looking to adopt a new forward line akin to, I don't know, Luis Enrique's PSG, a more fluid, interchangeable front three of sort, but I don't envision a player like Gordon replacing the goal-scoring prowess of a Lewandowski. Granted, I didn't envision Rafinha becoming an absolute colossus at Barca either, so maybe Gordon will become a superstar in this environment. Yet from the outside looking in, it's a little perplexing. I've seen some backlash from Barca fans bemoaning the fact that they're not immediately pursuing Atleti's Julian Alvarez instead, one of Europe's most sought-out forwards and a player who reportedly wants to depart the club. Financially speaking, it seems implausible that Barca could pull this deal off too. One could only assume that Barca will still look to strengthen their striker department this summer though. At this stage, Ferran is the only 9 at the club. A cost-effective solution could be pursuing Sekou Guirassy, who wants to leave Dortmund and has a buyout clause for 50 mil. Now, this may be a tad steep for a 30-year-old with little resale value, but he definitely enhanced Barca's forward line. There's also Mallorca's Muriqi. I know he's a certified La Liga unk, but this unk just bagged 23 goals in Spain's top flight for a relegated team. Honestly, just bring the Kosovo skipper in. This guy's like the Lionel Messi of Luke de Jongs. Does that make sense? Just quickly before we move on, I think it's interesting to see the Newcastle fanbase's immediate reaction to the news. They were devastated upon Isak leaving last summer, obviously drastically different circumstances there, but Gordon's departure has actually been received relatively well. Newcastle still aspire to be a big club, so selling one of their better players to a European giant isn't something they actively want to be doing. But in the specific case of Gordon, he clearly wanted to leave. They're not selling to a domestic rival. That's a positive. And for 80 mil, that should be more than enough to adequately replace. The only issue here is that Newcastle's recent recruitment has been spectacularly bad. Last season's window was atrocious in totality. So like Isak, Gordon leaves for big money, but finding a like-for-like replacement is something Newcastle have to get right. Otherwise, they'll go backwards. Switching gears to the international scene, and another day, another squad announcement, this time the Netherlands, and there's a fair few things to discuss here, so let's get into it. Starting with the goalkeepers, and this is definitely the least contentious selection throughout the squad. Verbruggen will of course be the number one. He's been the first choice keeper for the last 3 years, and I don't anticipate that will change anytime soon. Robin Roofs has had a phenomenal campaign with Sunderland, so great to see him in the fold, and Flecken is another reliable option. To be honest, all three are top keepers. Moving to the back line, and immediately two things stick out to me. The exclusion of Jeremy Frimpong and inclusion of Jurrien Timber, both of which have struggled with injuries this season, but ultimately Koeman has still entrusted in the Arsenal fullback centre-back. Now, if qualifiers were anything to go by, we know Koeman will probably line up in a back four, and he tends to prefer more physically dominant fullbacks. When Frimpong had featured previously, it was actually further forward as a right winger, so I'm not surprised he's been snubbed because he's not fully fit or in good form at all. Another absentee I feel for is Gertruda. He's been outstanding at Sunderland this season, but look at the depth in their backline already. For me, it's as good as any nation's. Someone was bound to miss out. Ironically, I think the Netherlands' biggest issue is their coach, who for me is tactically limited and a little too pragmatic considering the quality. That being said, the way he's set up this team best suits a player like Frankie de Jong. In 2022's tournament, the Netherlands set up with a double pivot that for me, fundamentally limited de Jong's ability to dictate the tempo in there. If you can't tell, I'm a huge fan of the guy. A midfield trio of de Jong, Gravenberch, and Reinders is pretty daunting on paper. Great to see De Roon get into the team as well. Bit of a surprise inclusion, but he's had a great season with Atalanta. Timber and Weifer also bolster that physicality in midfield. Koopmeiners is another highly versatile option. It's just a shame for me that Kai Schmidt didn't make the final squad. This is a future star of the game in my eyes, one of the best U20 central midfielders on the planet. Seriously, he's an immense talent. I didn't expect a manager like Koeman to truly appreciate his qualities, but he'll be there in future tournaments, no doubt. Now to the forward line, and I think this is probably the weakest area of the pitch for the Dutch team. No Xavi Simons is a big blow, one of their most creative players and a highly effective option pretty much anywhere in the final third. Now Depay is a bit of a national hero for the Netherlands. He's probably past his prime, now plying his trade at Corinthians. But remember, he was prolific during recent World Cup qualifying with 12 goal contributions in 8 World Cup qualifiers. He's also the nation's all-time leading goal scorer. If fully fit, he starts up top. But there lies the problem, because he's not fully fit right now. However, his potential absence may in fact be a good thing, because Donyell Malen is in the form of his life right now. Roma's January loanee has had an unbelievable couple of months. With 16 goal involvements in 18 Serie A games, he carried Roma to UCL football and somehow finished as the Serie A's second top goal scorer. He simply has to start for the Netherlands. However, I anticipate Koeman will back to Depay and shift Malen to the right wing, a role he is nowhere near as proficient in. Gakpo will probably start on the left. They've got a fair few winger options with Somerville, Lang, and Kluivert too. No out-and-out right winger, which could be a problem. Brian Brobbey's selection is definitely warranted. He's another Dutchman killing it at Sunderland currently. The biggest controversy is obviously Wout Weghorst's inclusion. I get why people are fuming that he was selected, but I also fully understand the rationale. A proper old school target man if they're chasing a goal in the dying embers. Who could forget the Battle of Lusail 4 years ago? As limited of a footballer as he is, it's a specialist profile that makes sense in a last chance saloon situation. One could argue Fleming could have done this job, but I don't know, man. Maybe it's just the nostalgia in me that yearns for the big man for one last dance. Moving back to club football, and Oliver Glasner has closed out his Crystal Palace legacy in emphatic fashion. In his final outing at the helm, the Austrian has led his side to a slender 1-0 victory over Rayo Vallecano, with Mateta scoring the decisive goal to win the Conference League. It's Glasner's third trophy accumulated in the space of a year, which is all the more extraordinary considering this club had never won a trophy in their previous 119 years of existence. Today's result ensures another season in Europe for Palace, this time via the Europa League, which will be particularly special for the Palace fans. Remember, back at the beginning beginning of the season, Palace were controversially booted out of the Europa League due to a multi-club ownership conflict that resulted in their demotion to the Conference League. They then lost Eze, and in January, their skipper Gehi departed, which led to major internal angst, where many expected Glasner to actually resign mid-season. Thankfully, he stayed in the job and has now guided them to even more silverware, their first ever European trophy. This man's legacy in South London is set in stone now. He is a Palace legend through and through. As to what's next for the Eagles, they're pushing hard for Iraola alongside AC Milan, so we'll see how that pans out. Same thing for Glasner. I think he's bound for a European giant in the future. His accomplishments at Palace are no joke. I do feel for Vallecano, an incredibly hard-working football team with a great fan base and community. For them to reach a European final is a miracle in itself, and there's no shame in losing to a financially superior side like Crystal Palace. It's no secret that English clubs are fully dominating in Europe, especially in the Europa and Conference League competitions where the financial supremacy is on another level. In the last 2 years, only English teams have won these two competitions. Simply no other league can compete with the Prem's lucrative finances. Only a select few clubs worldwide can realistically compete. I'm not saying this to discredit other leagues, it's just the objective reality in 2026. Speaking of English clubs, and Manchester United are ready to dip their toes in the market with the signing of Atalanta midfielder Ederson for a relatively modest fee too. The Telegraph are quoting 35 mil, BBC 38, The Guardian 37. Now this midfielder has been linked with other big clubs in the past. City were snooping about last season alongside Atletico Madrid, but it appears the Red Devils are in pole position to swoop for the Brazilian. The fact that he's only got 12 months remaining on his contract is probably why he's not overly pricey. Promising signs for United that they're getting this deal wrapped up early too. We know they're set for a midfield overhaul in the summer with Casemiro departing. Ugarte looks to be on his way out as well. That's if they can find a buyer for the out-of-form Uruguayan. Ederson is a bit of a different profile to someone like Casemiro, for instance. The outgoing midfielder is more of a 6, whereas Ederson is a box-to-box dynamic central midfielder. I thought he was incredibly unlucky to miss out on World Cup selection with Brazil, so he'll arrive at Old Trafford with a point to prove. One can assume that more midfield signings will now follow. I wouldn't be surprised to see them pursue Baleba more aggressively this window, maybe Mateus Fernandes of relegated West Ham, or if they've got serious cash to splash, perhaps they enter the race for Elliot Anderson. Either way, promising signs early in the window for United. Admittedly, Atalanta have been hit and miss in the past with transfers to this club. Amad Diallo was worth the previous investment. Højlund, not so much, but in the case of Ederson, I'm rather optimistic about what he'll bring to United. This isn't a potential signing. He's 26, one of the best midfielders in the Serie A, and is experienced as both an 8 and a 6. But United fans, what are your thoughts? Let me know below in the comments. Anyways, guys, that's all for today's DMAC Daily. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.